one of the assignments in our study that was good enough to get the kinds of results we got for students. This was one of the assignments that created a higher sense of belonging and a better sense of academic confidence for our students in the study. What I ask faculty to do now, and what I'll ask you to do, is to look at the purpose statement of this assignment upcoming and make it better. Make it more transparent, more relevant, more accessible for the students who would look at this assignment. And here is just the beginning part of the assignment. This is an intro level science course assignment. How could you make that purpose statement, skills and knowledge, even more transparent, relevant, accessible for all students in an intro science course?
And if somebody wants to speak up, you actually can. You can say in the chat, I'm about to speak, or you can just unmute yourself and say, here I am, I've got something to say. I know a bunch of you don't have your video on, but you've got audio going, so. And someone is saying, is the assumption that the assignment is given as a whole, or does a faculty member work through the assignment with the class, Marianne?
That's a really helpful and perceptive question, because in all of these cases, what you are seeing is the visual artifact of a conversation. So all of these assignments were given to the student on paper in this particular study that we did, and also then talked about. There was a conversation about these with the student.
Yeah.
When you say work through the assignment, it was not necessarily the case that students had a chance to start working on the assignment together in class. I think that's a great strategy, and it makes for better transparency, because then you watch the students struggle with what it is that's not transparent, and you can make real-time corrections. But that was not part of what we asked faculty to do in the study. Okay, so we have a purpose. Yes, the purpose is in fact to help, in part, it is to introduce students to being good presenters. Yeah, there's definitely some unpacking, as this person suggests. Some unpacking needs to happen.
Yeah.
Let me ask the question this way. If you were not a science major, where would you find the value for you of doing this assignment? What skills and knowledge would you walk away with as a non-science major, as a person who's never going to make a science poster?
Yep. And people are saying that there's more than one assignment here.
Yeah. That is often the case. When faculty start working on their own assignments, they discover that they could break them out into smaller pieces and have the students do a kind of experience with these bit by bit.
Yeah, the purpose of the assignment is to learn to identify scientific claims and the evidence that supports those claims.
Fantastic. Yeah, here we go. People are really zeroing in on this. How can non-scientists determine scientific merit? Yes, you are just a person reading about some new scientific discovery in the newspaper that affects your health or your family's health. How do you know whether these are reliable results, whether you can trust this evidence? Right? This is why that assignment might be valuable to the non-science major. So you have already discovered, even though you've only just heard about transparent assignment design, you already know how to make an assignment even more transparent.
Right.
And that is, in fact, the experience of faculty who then could use these slides in some sort of workshop. And so then what we do after that, and what you can do with these slides, is you can break faculty up into groups to start working on each other's assignment, on actual assignments that they would use in courses. And I like to frame that by giving you a chance here to use the purpose task criteria, that transparent framework, to say, why am I making you do this? Now that you've taken on the message, why would you spend 20 minutes working with your colleagues to do this? So we give them a rationale for why they'll walk away with an actual draft assignment they can then go use. They can do something right after this to combat the equity problem in higher ed. Got a compelling reason to do it. So we ask people to think of, are there volunteers who are ready to offer up their assignment for people to think about for the next 15 or 20 minutes. We have people sit with disciplinary strangers so that they can better replicate the experience of a novice student looking at an unfamiliar assignment. We then walk people through the process, describe your assignment to your group partners. Then we'll have people focus on just the purpose of the assignment, like you just did with those other assignments. And as students struggle to define the purpose, we don't let the teachers correct them. We say, just jot down what you're hearing that would help you make the purpose more transparent, but don't correct your colleagues when they get the purpose wrong. Their mistakes are your opportunity to make the purpose more transparent to your actual novice students. We do the same task for the assignment. What steps did you actually follow to do this assignment? Like Susan, you would panic about how to find a person to interview with that first assignment. That'd be step one probably for you, right?
Well, yeah.
But we ask people to list the steps, and then the instructors are meant not to correct those steps, but instead to jot down good steps they heard that they didn't even think to tell their students to do, or try to eliminate the wrong steps. And then we ask for them to consider the criteria. What would a student need in order to be thoroughly confident they were doing the task effectively, they were doing excellent quality work, and that they knew what a good example would look like? And so then we give faculty an opportunity to think about, how would you create that? You don't have to create it from scratch. You go find a published newspaper article or a journal article and pull a paragraph out and use your criteria list with students on that example of work. You don't necessarily have to find old students' examples or create your own. We talk about ways to provide examples. And then we have them go back to that research overview to pull out any further research-based strategies that they could apply to their assignments. And they walk out ready with an assignment they can use to combat the equity crisis in higher ed. We think about mapping this over a period of a semester. When would it be useful to do these kinds of things? Could you have students, usually they talk about breaking the assignment down into smaller pieces, and we think about the practice piece that doesn't count, that's low stakes, followed by the graded piece that does count, that's high stakes, and we map that out over the course of the semester. And then we wrap up with those faculty and their questions. We offer them all kinds of follow-up resources, like, do you want to run the same survey we used with your students? If you do, sign up here, we'll run the survey, and we'll give you a report on what your students said. A report that has charts and graphs in it, like the ones you saw earlier in the session. We offer them a chance to read online, to offer up their examples in an online environment, to have faculty who tune in that day offer them feedback about the purposes, tasks, and criteria of the assignment, just the assignments that get posted that day online. Okay, so that is the resource section. Those are the slides that you could use with faculty to walk them through this transparent assignment design process. Should we take any questions about that process before we move on to questions that leaders could productively think about together?
Well, there's one, does transparency look different in an advanced course than in a beginning one? Have you noticed that?
That's a great question, yes. In fact, we've actually tested, we're talking about one type of transparency here, assignment design, but we've been testing about 5 or 6 different methods, and for intro level students to get the biggest impact on retention rates, we think this is the one that helps intro level or novice students the most. I think for upper level students, we have in fact seen a statistically significant benefit. But for graduate students, for example, in humanities and social sciences, we're looking at students jointly designing the agenda for class meetings as perhaps the best possible transparent method for graduate students in the humanities and social sciences fields. But we don't yet have enough data to say that's a statistically significant finding yet. We need more a larger sample size to say that.
Mhm. Someone has just observed that it might depend on the course. This is Tracy Wacker. For example, I teach mycology, but none of our bio majors has much experience in it from core courses. So I'm teaching new jargon and so forth.
Right. And so that jargon would be new to your students, and your students would in fact be like novice students, even if they're juniors or seniors, right?
Right. Right. Learning is recursive.
Yes.
You teach writing and you get to a harder task, and all of a sudden your writing falls apart. You see your students struggling as they take on something that they don't know as well. So I think that certainly makes sense.
And for the students who we tested, I'd say about 2/3 of them were first-year students, and or were in, let's say 2/3 of them were in intro-level courses, and 1/3 of them roughly were in sort of intermediate level courses. That gives you a sense of their novice-ness.
Yeah, yeah. But there's a certain elegance in having an activity related to purpose. You can pick up the idea pretty quickly and imagine how you can work on it with your colleagues and how that process itself becomes iterative. So that's...
And we even now have given our faculty a kind of template that it spells out for the student's perspective. How could I ask questions about purpose, task, criteria to help my faculty member make those things clearer to me? And I'm happy for Susan to share that with you afterwards as well.
Yeah, I happily send. I've got the address list, so you'll get the slides, those handouts, and then later on we'll have the editions of this workshop we'll have on YouTube, and I'll send you the link to that too. So I know a lot of you are thinking about how you can do these workshops yourself, and people are saying, yes, it would be helpful to have those handouts.
Good.
Yeah.
So let's move on and think a little bit together about how might a transparent framework help to boost student success in the different kinds of contexts that you have a lot of control over. We have looked at this in terms of courses, programs, and depending on the goal of an institution, some of them have aimed to use these in courses where there's a high DF or withdrawal rate, or they've used them in general education courses or intro-level courses, large courses, maybe as a major or a pathway through a major. We've also noticed that across units, a transparent framework has been helpful for staff members to collaborate around efforts that help student success. I'll show you what that looks like in a second. And we've begun thinking about networks of schools, what types of schools might benefit. For example, that AAC&U study that I talked about looked specifically at minority serving institutions, but there might be value in applying this just to community colleges or to a region or to some other kind of a cohort or a discipline-based audience. There are different types of networks that might benefit. For example, a LEAP network. But let's look at what that looks like. So let's say you wanted to apply this to a course or to a program. You might look at things like first year to second year retention rates, which we looked at, or course learning outcomes. You know, how do students master the learning outcomes in courses where they're receiving this kind of greater transparency? So you could end up with charts that tracked students' retention rates or charts that looked at students' mastery levels of specific learning outcomes at your institution, right? So use our survey even to ask students questions about the learning outcomes at your institution. Susan, sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to come back. Somebody earlier on asked a question about retention, and I saw an opportunity to put it in. When you're doing comparisons of year to year persistence, right? For students who did have and didn't have the intervention.
That is true.
Okay. There was a person who wondered more about that. So if the person who asked that question wants to, the comparison was in there in the slide, but maybe you could stick around later and talk it over. And the other thing people are asking is, you go around the country and have workshops like is.
I do, yes. More and more all the time. And I also do these online
Yeah.
as a way to